This is Gemara Metziah, Daf Sadi Dalid, and we're holding on the bottom of Sadi Gimel and Beis, Baruch Hashem. Another exciting day as we'll be wrapping up the seventh Perek in Mirza Hashem here in Metziah. We're holding two lines into the very wide lines on Sadi Gimel and Beis as we begin a Mishnah. The Mishnah discusses further how Einsim relate to Shaimrim. Says the Mishnah, Zeiv echad ino yoines. One wolf is not considered an oines, whereas Shnei Zeivim, two wolves, is considered an oines. Rav Yehuda Imer b'shas bashlachas Zeivim, at a time of a plague of wolves, af Zeiv echad oines, even one Zeiv will be an oines. And Rashi right away comments the reason being Shachayara Mishulachas B'Gzeres HaMelech that when there's a Gzeres HaMelech, when there's a plague, then even one wolf will jump on and attack. Continues the Mishnah, Shnei Klavim, two dogs, Eino Oines. Yodeya Habavli Oimer Mishum Rameir. If it attacks from one side, then it's not an oines. Ruchais is an oines. Halistim robbers are his oines. Haria devan emem bardalis. Hari a lion, a dove, a bear, a nemer, a leopard, a bardalis type of animal. Nachash a snake. Hari lu oines. Imasay, when is this mizan shabau be'leihem? Avaloy lichon lemakon gidude chayav listim. However, the shepherd led the sheep into an area of chaya and listim, wild beasts or robbers. You walked into the problem on your own. Mesa kedarka. If the animal died naturally, sagfa umesa. However, if the shepherd afflicted the animal, didn't treat it properly, and it died, then also, if the shepherd brought up the animal to the top of a steep mountain, and it fell, if the shepherd brought it up to the top of the steep mountains, and it falls, then and again, the last two cases, the difference being ulsa or hela. Ulsa meant the animal went up on its own. It's an oines. What am I supposed to do? Hela means if I brought up the animal to this steep place and it fell, then I brought it up, so it's not called an oines. Says the Gemara v'hatanya, Akasha on the first part of the Mishnah. The Brisa says Zeiv echad eight oines, and our Mishnah says Zeiv echad ein oines. Amar Nachbar Yitzchak ahi b'shas b'shachas zeidim v'Rav Yehudi. The Brisa is talking about at the time of a plague of wolves, and it's going within the shita of Rav Yehuda. We continue quoting the Mishnah that halistim are oines. Ask the Gemara, why in the world is listim? Oines amai luki gavra lahade gavra. Put one person against another person and let the shepherd fight. You have one robber and you got the shepherd, so take him on. Amarav listin mizuyim. It's an armed robber. The shepherd's not carrying a gun, and therefore it's considered an oines. Ibai leho asked the Gemara listin mizuyan v'roya mizuyin mahu. What's the story if the shepherd is carrying a gun and the robber is also carrying a gun? Now, how do we consider this case? Mahu, mi amrina, do we say uki gavra ladi gavra? Fight it out. A robber, the listim, will risk his life, and therefore it is considered an oines, whereas the shepherd will not. Says the Gemara Mistavra, you know what's logical? The high maser navshei, the high loy maser navshei. It's logical to say that the robber, the listim, will risk his life, whereas the shepherd will not. Amar le'abayel Rav on the last line of Zadigim Olamibez Ashkechei. What is the din if the shepherd met V'amar le Ganva? The shepherd tells the robber, Ganva Sarya, you horrible thief, Beduchta Palanya Svinan. In such and such place we were sitting. Kach v'kach gavri ika ba'adan, and these people were amongst us as we turn over to Sadi Dalid Amid Aleph ika ba'adan kach kalvi ika ba'adan. This amount of dogs, kach v'zuksa ika psikalon. They're this type of sling man against va'azal v'shakal minei, and the thief went and took the animals. So what's the halacha in this case? Is the shepherd now at some level mechuyav that he incited the thief? He sort of spoke up to him. We have this and we have that, and then the listim showed him he was business. Amarlei harei holchel nabaki k'dudei chayv listim. Yes, it's comparable to him walking into a place of chayv listim, and therefore he is indeed, the shepherd is indeed responsible. And we continue with the Mishnah at the top of Sadidal Ramad Aleph. Matana Masna Shomer Chinam. What is the story if a Shomer Chinam, Masna Shomer Chinam. A Shomer Chinam is allowed to stipulate Leo's Potter Mishvua. Vashaya Leo's Potter Milashalim. Neisach Vasacha Leo's Turim Mishvua Umilashalim. Basically, you want to make a stipulation when you take on your shmirah, that is fine. It says the Mishnah, what's the general rule? Kol masna mashe kosav atayra tanai batel. Chol tanai sheish ma'isa v'tchilasai tanai batel. Chol evshlo lekaima b'seifa v'hisnima v'tchilasai, then tanai kayim. So says the Mishnah, 3 steps within general tanaim. You cannot make a condition keneged that which it says in the Torah. Says the Mishnah, if you make a condition with a Maisa B'tchilasa, it doesn't work. But if you're Efshal L'kaim B'Seifai, then it will work. So says the Gemara, Amai, what is the reason why the Shomer could be Masneh, Leos Patim Yishvur, the Shomer Chinam, the Shayal, Leos Patim Shalim, the obvious Kasha, the Mishnah itself, Masna Mashek Osabatayru. The Mishnah seemingly started off saying you can make it tonight. Then the Mishnah said, you know what the rule is? You can't make it tonight. Can I get the Torah? Says the Gemara. That's a direct contradiction. Answer V'chola Masna Mashek Osabatayru quotes the Gemara. Tanai Batal. So how in the Mishnah could he make a Tanai? The Shemachinam each one can get their dinim. Mani answers the Gemara of Yehudi Damar Bedavar Shabim Mamoin Tanai Kayim. When it comes to monetary matters, says Rav Yehuda, then you are allowed to make a condition even against that which the Torah says. Now quotes the Gemara. Where does this come from? The Tanya we learned in the Brisa. Ha'omer li'isha, someone says to a woman, Ariyah mikudeshes li, you are married to me. He marries a woman with the condition that he does not have the obligations that a husband usually has. The halacha is they are mikudeshes. But Tanai batal devar Rameir. But says Rameir, the Tanai doesn't work. But comes along Rav Yehuda and Rav Yehuda Aimer, it's true in general. But bedavar shebim mamoin Tanai kayum. The chiddush of Rav Yehuda that for monetary matters you're allowed to even stipulate against that which the Torah says. Ask the Gemara v'chimasa muklis like Rav Yehuda. Can you potentially say the Mishnah is going with the Shita of Rav Yehuda? And that is the reason why you're allowed to stipulate against that which it says in the Torah. Shomer Chinam to be part from Shua, Shayali is part from the Shalim, the Sechva Sechli is part from Shua, the Shalim. Ema Seifa. But what did the Seifa say? Kol Amasna Mashikasaba Torah Tanoi Batol. Asan the Rameir, the Seifa itself said you can't make such a condition. Explains the Gemara, loy kasha. Loylam Rabbi Yehudi, really the Mishnah is Rabbi Yehuda. V'seifa, b'davar sheinu shel mamayin. Ema seifa, but says Gemara 1 second. What else did the seifa say? Kol tanai sheish by ma'isa b'tchi lasai. Any condition that has a ma'isa at the beginning, then what? Tanai batal. Man Shamsa Disley Hai Svara, who's the one that holds of this ideology that if there's a Maisa, it's going to be Tanai Batal, Titania, Hasvara Meir. But that is Gufara Meir, Titania, Machalafta, Abba Chalafta, Vishkara Hanani, Oimim Shemra Meir. Tanai Koidin La Maisa, Harisa Tanai, Harisa Tanai, Maisa Koidin Tanai, you know Tanai. Says the Gemara, you're right. Ela Kula Rameiri. So it goes back and the Gemara says, we're stuck. We're trying to figure out who is the Tana of the Mishnah. On one hand, the Mishnah says, Tanai Batal. When it says, Kol Masna Mashikasav B'Torah. On the other hand, the Mishnah started off and said, you could yes be Masna, seemingly against Mashikasav B'Torah. And then the end of the Mishnah is clearly Rameir, when it differentiated between Tanai Koid and Lamais or not. So concludes the Gemara, it's Kula Rameir V'Shayni Hacha. Here, by the Shaimrim, why are they allowed to be masna and stipulate against the Torah? Because he never obligated himself. The Tanai over there is not going to be going keneged the Torah. It's going to be preempting the din of the Torah. Because it's coming before the din of the Torah comes into effect, that's the reason why it's going to work. Continues the Gemara. So therefore, we're concluding that it's not Rabbi Yehuda. It's indeed Rameir and Shomrim have different dinim. Tana, we learned in a Brisa. Umasne Shomer Sachar Liyos Kishayel. The Brisa says a different level of Tanai. Our Mishnah spoke about Tanai and Tipater from different dinim. Says the Brisa, what about lowering your level of responsibility? The Shomer Sachar can be masna, it can be like a shayel. But my b'dvarim, how does he do this with dvarim? Says the Gemara, but that doesn't work. Amar Shmuel b'shekana miyadi made a kin. Yochanan Amar filu tema b'shekana miyadi. Bahia no kanafik leikala dinish mehemno Gemara mishaben nafshei. With the benefit that people know, people talk about that he's a trustworthy guy, that he accepted to be a Shomer Sachar, he is Mishabed himself. We continue at the end of the Mishnah. If you're able to Mekayim it at the end, then the Mishnah says, and you made a condition in the beginning, then Tanai Kayim. Says the Gemara, what's the obvious implication? That if you're not able to fulfill it, then the Tanai would be Batal. Oh, my Rav, Tavla, my Rav. 20 lines for the end of the parak. First one line is Tavla. Zu Devi Rabbi Yehuda ben Teima vel Chachamim Aimim Aval Mishav Shalei Kaima Basayfai V'Histala Mitchilasai Tanai Kayom Ditanya. We learned in our Brisa Rizagi Teich. If someone gives his wife a get, Menashe Talariki on condition to go to the heavens, Menashe Ter to the time. Conditions, not sensible conditions. Conditions to go to the depths. You swallow a reed of 100 amma. You walk across the Amagadol with your feet. So what's the din? Says the Brisa. We had this in the Gemara in Gittin. Niskay matanai harez the get. Loy niskay matanai eno get. Comes along Rabbi Yehuda ben Tema Omer Kozeh get. Why? Klal Omer Rabbi Yehuda ben Tema. These are impossible entities. Therefore, he's considered merely just tormenting her, mafliga, making up ridiculous conditions. But lamaisa, the kosher, the get is going to be kosher. And what's the halacha in this case? Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Rav halacha. That is a good Tanai. Amar Rav Nachman Yitzchak Mastis Tanami Deket L'Ktani Yeshali L'Kayim B'Seif V'Islam Mitchasa Tanai Kayim Yeshali Kayim Tanai Batal, but the get would be good, but Tanai will be Batal. Shema Mina, and that's all right. They were going with the opinion of Rav Yehuda ben Tema, which is going to be the Psak Halacha. Hadron Aloch HaSoicher Es HaPoyalim, and we forge of Haiter, going going straight into the 8th parak, continuing the halachas of Shemira, of Shaimrim, beginning most particularly with the halachas of She'ila, of borrowing. Says the Mishnah on the bottom of Sadi Dalet Amud Aleph, Hashaya leza baros onu borrows a cow, v'shal baileha ima, and he borrows the owner with it, or he rents the owner, hires the owner to with it. Shala bailim sachran, or he borrowed the item and or hired him. And this is the Patur that we've mentioned in the past, but of course this is the Makar. Any time that the owner is there together with the She'ilo or the Schiros, the halacha is there's Xeris HaKosiv that the Shayel, the borrower, or the Seicha, the renter, is going to be Potter. We move over to Sadidalam and Beis, continues the Mishnah. Aval shalas abara vacha shalas abaylim. Isachran umesa. If you borrow the cow and then you borrow the services of the owner, or then you hired him afterwards, umesa chayiv shenemar bayilov enimai yishalem yishalem. Then you certainly have to pay. So says Rashi, speaking out to the Chiddush over here, even though he's there at the time of the Einsim, it's not considered a sheila b'bailim lifterei. The P'tur is, if you borrowed b'bailim, it has to be at there, but Shas, the sheila, the Gemara will explain. But the fact that you borrowed the owner after, and he was there at the time of the Misa, that is not enough to create this P'tur. Says the Gemara, Midiktani Seifa, from the second half of the first part of the Mishnah says, you borrow the owner and then you borrow the cow. That the first case, which says that you borrow the owner with the cow, it means ima mamish, literally with the cow. It was all one situation, one story, the she'ila, the borrowing of the cow and of the owner. Ima mamish, mimish kachasla. How is that possible? Says the Gemara, we seemingly are deducing it has to be ima, that the two happen hand in hand simultaneously, of the borrowing of the cow and the owner. But says the Gemara, how can you do that? The cow is with Meshicha and the owner is with Amira. How can you do the two things simultaneously? Explains the Gemara by his Ema 6 lines down. The cow is in the borrows, the person who's borrowing the cow, his chatzir, and therefore the shayel. So you don't have to do any meshicha. Therefore, they both can happen simultaneously with an amira. Or we can say that the case is that he said, you're not going to make a kinyan, you're not borrowed until you do the meshicha on the cow, and therefore the two happen simultaneously. Says the Gemara, Tanana Sam, we're 10 lines down. First one line is Tanana Sam Arba Shaimrim Heim, quoting a Mishnah back on Daf Samach Gimel. There are 4 Shaimrim. Shemichin v'ashayel nizachah v'asaycha shemichin nishva l'kol sayel mishalim v'zakol nizachah nishva in al shvuah v'al shvuah v'al meisa u'mishalmim esaveid v'esageneva. So a Mishnah which we've learned, the Mishnah detailing the Dalet Shaimrim and their Chiyuvei Shemira, says the Gemara Minna Hani Mili. So this is a little bit of we would call it Shalebim Kaimai. Of course, this would have been easier to have been discussed back in Daf Samach Gimel, but okay. The Gemara over here goes back and discusses what is the Makar for the different Chiyuvei Shemira, the Tana Rabbanan. We learned in a Brisa. Parsha Vishayna Nemra b'Shemer Chinam. Shniya b'Shemer Sachar. Shlishis b'Shayel. And the third parsha is about a Shayel. Says the Gemara, B'Shalma Shlishis b'Shayel mefurash. The fact that you're explaining that the third parsha is about a Shayel, that's explicit. The Pasuk says, Chiyishal Ishmeim Re'eu v'Nishvar excuse me, v'nishbar oimeis, ba'alav, einima yishalim, shalim yishalim, al rishanim yishalim rechinam, shnei b'sayim sachar. Ask the Gemara, ipachano. Let's flip around the order. Says the Gemara, mistaver shniya b'shem sachar. Why? Shkein chayav ignev aveda. Says the Gemara the exact opposite. Adrab rishanim b'shem sachar. Shekim shamta shlumi keva b'tayin tanis. Shin shamta shlumi keva b'tayin tanis ganef. Says the Gemara, filu hach. Still, we're trying to figure out why we're saying that the first parsha is talking about Shem Rechinam, the second parsha is talking about Shem Sachar. Explains the Gemara, Karna b'lo shvua, adifa mikvelu b'shvua. The obligation to pay the keren when the animal is stolen, even without a shvua, is greater than the obligation of paying kefel with a shvua, and therefore it makes more sense to make the Shem Sachar the subject of the second parsha, because over there you're paying karno b'lo shvua, which is a higher level. Says Gemara Teida, Tashayel kol hana shaloi v'inu mishalim el keren v'hashayel kol hana shaloi. Excuse me, the shayel kol hana shaloi v'inu mishalim el keren. So Gemara proves that karno b'lo shvua is adifa from the fact that a shayel has a similar chiyuv that he's going to have to pay the keren when he gets the hana. Ask the Gemara, what do you mean v'hashayel kol hana shaloi in the second white line? What do you mean the shal gets all the hana? He has to give the animal food. The kaima ba'agam, the animal's in an agam, and therefore you don't have to feed it. You have to watch it. B'netar masa, there's a city watchman. It doesn't mean kol hana shaloi by the bar. You know what it means? Ela roiv hana shaloi. Talking about borrowing kalim, which of course don't have to be watched, etc. So that's how we're going to know each part of the Mishnah corresponding to its chiyuvei shmir in the Torah, Shem Rechinam, Shem Sachar, and Shoyel. And the fourth Y line says the Gemara, quoting the end of the Mishnah, so the Gemara now wants to figure out these dinim. I understand. Im ganavi ganevim yishalim lebailov elaveda minalan. Where do we know that a shomer sachar has to pay for aveda? Titania says the Gemara in the ganavi ganev eli ali ganeva aveda minayin tam lamer ganavi ganev mikol makom. The extra time there it says im ganavi ganev shows you even have to pay for aveda. Says the Gemara, 1 second. That's a machlekes. That's the way the Torah talks in double Shaina, so we can't learn out anything far from it. Says the Gemara, Amri b'marava kalva chaymer uma geneva shekureveli oines mishalem. If when there's a geneva, which is pretty close to oines, not what you could have done, yet the Shem Sachar has to pay. Aveda shekureveli pshia lokolshkin. Certainly the Shem Sachar should have to pay. Ve'edach. And what's the other mandamar going to say? Why do we need the double lashon of Gani Vignevi learn from the Kal V'chaimer? Most that's Kal V'chaimer dar because of Lakra. Often you decide that things which are learned in the Kal V'chaimer, the Torah explicates them either way. And we continue with another din from the Mishnah. V'hashayel mishali mezakol. We're about 15 lines at the bottom. The first word on line is Akol. Says the Gemara, Bish l'mshura meis d'chsev b'chish l'shmeim re'eu v'nishvar meis el shvuya captivity b'shel minalan v'chitim neil mishvura meisa ma l'shvura meisa if it gets broken or dies shekein einsa the salik adaita. These are normal einsimu timer who, so then you have to pay timer b'shvuya shekein einsa to loy salik adaita who. So how do you know shvuya? That's not something you think about. The animal's going to be captive. Elenemra shavura umeisa b'shayel v'nem shvura meisa b'shaymer sachar malalon shvuya imoy avkan shvuya imoy. And that's the reason why a show is going to be chayiv for shvuya. Says Michael Mifrach, I could ask mal shaymer sachar shkein liftar timer b'shal shkein l'chiyav ella. Says Gemara, you're right. You know what the makar is? Kirav Nalson, the Tanya, Rav Nalson, Aimer, 5 lines from the bottom. Nemar oimer oy the Rabbi Shvuya. That we have a special drush of oy. Hi oy mi bay lechalek. The zalgay demina de tivra umeisa loy machayev. The oy has to tell you that each one's its own chiyuvin. Because I would have thought that the only time you're chayev is if it has a broken limb and it dies. Kamash mulan. The oy teaching you that each one's its own chiyuvim. Hanichal Rav Yonasan al Rav Yeshaya Michael and Meimar. According to Rav Yeshaya, the word oy is not necessary, and it's going to come to teach us shvuya. Titanya, as we learned in a brisa, ish asher yikalas aviv imay, a person that curses a parent, ein li ela aviv ve'imay, both. Aviv lo imay, imay lo aviv minayin. How do we know that there's a separate chiyuv for each one independently? Tam lemer aviv ve'imay kilel, aviv kilel, imay kilel. Divrei Rav Yeshaya. Rav Yonasan mer mashma shneim ke'echad u'mashma echad b'fnei atzmai. Actually, yivlecha kasav yachtav. So I asked the Gemara, this is the end of the kasha, that according to Rav Yeshaya, he does it darshan from the oy. As we see by aviv v'imai, he still learns each one is independently, just with extra vav, even though there's no oy. So according to Rav Yeshaya, how is he going to learn by us the din of shvuya? And we conclude on the top of Sadihayam and Aleph says the Gemara, Rav Yeshaya, we don't need to split it up by us. Why? There's a svara that a broken bone is similar to dying. What's the difference if the entire animal is killed or part of the animal is killed? And therefore, that Rav Yeshaya is going to have the extra word to darshan from there. Shvuya, the animal was captured. We'll pick it up from Geneva Vavin on top of Sadiyam Aleph and Mirza Hashem.